Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that I think affects us all, software updates.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically,
Yeah.
we're going to be looking at the iOS 18.1.1 update that Apple just rolled out. And it was kind of an emergency fix, which always, you know, makes you kind of sit up and take notice.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at, exactly what these vulnerabilities were, why this update was so urgent, and what it means for you.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly interesting here is that Apple labeled this as an emergency security update, which means they found something pretty serious that they needed to patch right away.
Yeah, and I think that
Yeah.
it makes you think about how many people rely on their iPhone, on
Yeah.
a daily basis for banking, communication, everything. So that level of urgency definitely, raises some eyebrows. So what exactly were these vulnerabilities in the update notes? They mentioned some pretty technical terms like CVE 2024-44308 and CVE 2024-44309. I don't know about you, but those don't mean a whole lot to me.
Yeah, I have no idea what those mean either.
But they also mentioned the words JavaScript Core and WebKit, and those sound a little bit more familiar.
Yeah, those are definitely things that most people have heard of before. So those CVE codes, they're just standardized ways to identify specific vulnerabilities. You can kind of think of them like unique IDs for each software flaw that's discovered. But you're right, JavaScript Core and WebKit, those are really the key things to understand. Um, Essentially, JavaScript Core is a framework that allows web developers to create interactive elements on websites. So, things like animations or forms that you fill out online.
Okay.
That's JavaScript Core at work.
Okay, so it's part of what makes websites dynamic and interactive. What about WebKit?
So WebKit is the engine that powers Apple's Safari browser. So anytime you're browsing the web on an iPhone, WebKit's running behind the scenes, rendering those web pages.
Okay, so these are pretty fundamental parts of the iPhone experience then. What kind of security risks were found with them?
Well, that's where things get a little bit concerning. The update notes mention the risk of something called arbitrary code execution. And to put it simply, this means a hacker could potentially exploit these vulnerabilities to run their own malicious code on your phone.
So it's almost like they could hijack your phone remotely.
Pretty much, yeah. I think of it this way. Imagine someone having access to your photos, your messages, even your bank accounts, all because of a security flaw in your software.
That's scary. That really drives home why these updates are so critical. It's not just about getting new features or fixing bugs. It's about protecting our personal information from people who might try and exploit, these weaknesses.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
what makes this even more concerning is that this isn't just a theoretical risk. According to a recent Forbes article, Apple explicitly stated that these vulnerabilities were being actively exploited. So this wasn't just a potential threat, it was a real and present danger.
Whoa, so people were already out there trying to take advantage of these flaws.
It seems that way, yeah.
So it sounds like a race against time to get everybody updated.
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity experts quoted in the article were very clear. Update as soon as possible. And, it's not just about protecting ourselves. It's also about protecting others. Because if our devices are compromised, they can be used to spread malware or launch attacks on other systems. It's kind of a chain reaction.
Yeah, you don't want to be that weak link. Okay, so I'm really starting to see the bigger picture here. So what did Apple actually do about this? They released the iOS 18.1.1 update to patch these holes.
Exactly. The update was designed to close those security gaps and prevent hackers from exploiting them. And, it wasn't just for the latest iPhones either. Apple also released iOS 17.7 and .2 for users with older devices who haven't upgraded to iOS 18 yet, which addresses the same vulnerabilities. So it shows that they're taking it seriously across their whole user base.
So it doesn't matter which iPhone you have, as long as you update it, you should be protected.
That's the goal, yeah. And to emphasize just how serious this was, even the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, issued a warning urging everyone to update their Apple devices immediately. They specifically highlighted that cyber threat actors could exploit these flaws to take control of affected systems.
Wow. I mean, when CISA's weighing in, it's a big deal. But I am curious. The update notes mentioned these exploits being seen on Macs. But do we know for sure if iPhones and iPads were actually affected?
It's hard to say for certain, but it's always better to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to security updates. The underlying technologies are similar across Apple devices, so it's not unreasonable to think that iPhones and iPads could be just as vulnerable.
Right. It's better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to our personal data. But thinking about how even a company like Apple, that's known for its focus on security, is susceptible to these kinds of threats, it really makes you wonder about the state of software security as a whole.
Yeah, you've hit on a really important point. I mean, if even the tech giants aren't immune, it really underscores the challenges we face in ensuring the safety and security of our digital lives.
That's a great point to pause on, actually. I think we've covered a lot about these specific vulnerabilities in iOS, but there's a whole wider conversation about software security in general. So when we come back,
Yeah.
we'll explore that bigger picture and what it means for all of us as users.
Okay, so we've established that even tech giants like Apple can have these vulnerabilities. And they're not always theoretical, sometimes they are being actively exploited. Which, makes me wonder, what can we as individuals do to make sure that our iPhones are as secure as possible?
That's a great question, and it is something we all need to be thinking about. You're right, it can feel overwhelming sometimes, trying to keep up with all the latest threats. But there are some pretty simple steps we can all take to improve our security posture.
I think when a lot of people hear the word security posture, they think of something really technical. But you're saying there are basic things we can do. Absolutely. It starts with understanding that security isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. And thankfully, there are some easy habits that we can all adopt that can significantly reduce our risk.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the first step in building those habits?
So we've already talked about this, but it's worth repeating because it really is the foundation of good security hygiene, keeping your software up to date.
Right, and I think the challenge for some people is just remembering to do it. Life gets busy, you
Yeah.
know, and those update notifications can be easy to dismiss.
Yeah, absolutely. But luckily, Apple has made it pretty straightforward to keep your iPhone updated. You can even set it to update automatically overnight, so you don't even have to think about it.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so updates are step one. What else can we do?
Strong passwords. Absolutely essential. And I'm not talking about password 123 or your birthday. Those are way too easy to guess. We need complex passwords that are unique for each account and ideally stored in a secure password manager.
You know, I used to think password managers were only for really tech-savvy people,
Yeah.
but I finally started using one last year, and it's been a game changer. I don't have to remember all those complicated passwords.
Right. They really are lifesavers. And they can really boost your security because they help you create and manage strong, unique passwords without having to remember them all yourself.
Okay, so updates. Strong passwords. What else? I'm taking notes here.
Another crucial step is enabling two-factor authentication whenever possible. It adds an extra layer of security to your accounts. By requiring you to enter a code from your phone or email in addition to your password.
Right, I've seen that before. So even if someone does manage to steal your password, they can't actually access your account without that second form of verification.
Exactly. It's a simple but really powerful way to make it much harder for hackers to get into your accounts.
It seems like layering these different security measures is really key. It's not relying on any one thing. It's building up multiple levels of protection.
Yeah, exactly. It's about creating a web of security that makes it much more difficult for attackers to succeed.
So what else can we add to that web of security?
Being cautious about the links you click, especially in emails or messages from unknown senders. Phishing scams are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and they're often designed to trick you into giving away your personal information.
Yeah, and those phishing emails can be so sneaky. Sometimes they look incredibly official.
Oh, for sure.
Because is there anything we can look out for to try and avoid falling for them?
Definitely. Pay close attention to the sender's email address. Does it look legitimate? Are there any typos or misspellings? Hover over any links before clicking them to see where they actually lead. And if something feels off or too good to be true, it probably is. Trust your gut.
Those are good reminders. I think it's easy to get complacent when you're scrolling through emails or browsing online.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, be mindful of the websites that you visit. Stick to reputable sites, especially when entering sensitive information like credit card details. And look for the little padlock icon in the address bar. That indicates a secure connection.
Oh, okay, so even if a website looks trustworthy, if it doesn't have that secure connection, it's best to steer clear.
Exactly. Better safe than sorry. Another thing people may not think about is the information they share on social media. Be selective about what you post, because that information can be used to target you in phishing scams or other attacks.
Oh, that's a good point. If someone knows your birthday, your pet's name, your favorite vacation spots, they can use that information to craft more convincing phishing attempts.
Exactly. It's all about being aware of our digital footprint and thinking critically about what we share online.
So much of this comes down to just being informed and paying attention. It's not about being paranoid. It's about just being aware.
Right. And there's one more tool I recommend. especially when connecting to public Wi-Fi. Using a VPN or a virtual private network.
I've heard of VPNs, but I don't really fully understand how they work.
Yeah. So VPNs encrypt your internet traffic, making it much harder for hackers to intercept your data. They basically act like a secure tunnel for your online activity.
Okay. So if I'm at a coffee shop or an airport using the public Wi-Fi, using a VPN can help protect my information.
Exactly. It adds an extra layer of security for those situations where you're not in control of the network.
That's great to know. Okay, so we've got updates, strong passwords, two-factor authentication, being careful about links and websites, watching what we share online, and using a VPN on public Wi-Fi. Is there anything else? Or have we covered it all?
I think we've hit the major points, at least for individual users. But there's a whole other side to this conversation about what the tech industry can do to improve software security.
Right. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
There are broader implications for how software is developed and the responsibility of companies to make sure that their products are secure.
Exactly. That's a much bigger discussion, and one that's worth exploring further.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. We've covered a lot about what individuals can do to stay safe online. But when we come back in part 3, we'll shift gears and delve into that broader discussion about the future of software security and what it means for all of us. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We've talked about, how we can protect our own iPhones, but I want to zoom out a little bit because these vulnerabilities in iOS really got me thinking. If even Apple has these issues, what does that say about software security as a whole?
That's the big question, isn't it? It really highlights a fundamental challenge we face in the digital world. Software is just becoming increasingly complex. And with that complexity comes, an increased risk of vulnerabilities.
It's like a giant puzzle where even the tiniest missing piece can compromise the whole thing.
Exactly.
And it's not just iPhones either, right? Apple released updates for Macs, Apple Watches, even their new Vision OS.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. And it's not just Apple. Think about all the software that we use every day. Web browsers, operating systems, apps, they're all susceptible to these kinds of vulnerabilities.
It's kind of a sobering thought. Like, you really realize how much we rely on software to function in the modern world. And yet there's this inherent vulnerability.
And that vulnerability is often exploited. I mean, there's a whole underground economy of hackers and cybercriminals who are constantly looking for ways to exploit these weaknesses for their own gain.
So it's like an arms race. Developers trying to build secure software and hackers trying to find ways to break it.
Exactly.
And it seems like the hackers kind of have the advantage because they only need to find one weakness, whereas developers need to try and secure everything.
That's the challenge.
So what can the tech industry do to try and shift the balance a little bit? Do they need to fundamentally rethink their approach to security?
Well, I think they do. Security can't be an afterthought. It needs to be built into the development process from the very beginning.
So it's not just about fixing problems as they occur. It's about building software in a way that's secure from the ground up.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of security awareness at every level of an organization.
Because I imagine there's a lot of pressure to release new products and features quickly. And sometimes that can come at the expense of security.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's often the case. And there needs to be, I think, a better balance between speed and security.
Right, because as we've seen, the consequences of neglecting security can be huge.
Right.
Not just for companies, but for individuals too.
For sure. And that brings us back to, the individual responsibility piece as well. While it's important for companies to step up their game, we as users need to be proactive too.
So it's about meeting in the middle. Both sides taking responsibility for creating a more secure digital world.
I think so.
It's like a shared responsibility. We're all in this together, both the creators and the users of technology.
I like that. It is a shared responsibility.
Well, even though we've been talking about some pretty serious stuff, I actually feel kind of empowered by this conversation, knowing that there are things that we can do both individually and collectively to make a difference.
Me too. It's easy to feel helpless sometimes in the face of all these complex challenges. But knowledge is power. And the more we understand about the risks and the solutions, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and to advocate for change.
Absolutely. And thankfully, there are tons of great resources available online to help us stay informed about all the latest developments in cybersecurity.
For sure. Organizations like CISA and the National Institute of Standards and Technology offer a lot of practical guidance or resources for individuals and businesses.
We'll be sure to include links to those resources in the show notes. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We've covered a lot today, from the specifics of that iOS update to the broader issues of software security. But I really want to leave you with one final thought. Even though the digital world can feel overwhelming at times, we're not powerless. By staying informed, taking those steps to protect ourselves, and demanding better security practices from the companies that we rely on, we can all contribute to a safer and more secure digital world. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe online.